Michael Van Runkle here for HotCars.com. Finally got my hands on a 2022 Toyota Supra 3.0 built by BMW. I've really been wanting to drive this car ever since they brought it back for a 5th generation. The question in my mind has been, when you get a company like Toyota and a company like BMW working together, can their engineers bring together the best of both worlds? The answer so far is sort of. So let's climb in there and I'll show you what I mean, but first please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. Thanks. First thing you notice when you get into the Supra is that there's a surprising amount of space. And I sort of chalk that up to the BMW influence. I'm 6'1", long legs. I don't even have the seat all the way back. I can keep going further back. Plenty of headroom, thanks to those little nifty gurney bubbles. And the steering wheel is nice and adjustable. It's a pretty nice cockpit here. It's very cockpit feeling because the dash and hood are long and sort of going up, and then they go down and you can see the arrow lines on the hood. The dash is well designed, but some of the materials are not quite as premium as a BMW. But that's part of the trade-off here. We've got Toyota and BMW. The steering wheel feels solidly Toyota. Thin rim, a little bit firm, but it does the trick. The only problem is that the hole here is not a hole and it doesn't have a flat bottom steering wheel, which I feel like would be pretty appropriate. But all of that goes out the window because then you fire it up. It's that BMW B58 twin scroll turbocharged 3.0 liter inline-six, and it's just silky smooth. The shifter takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's one of the sort of modern select and push buttons and push side buttons. It doesn't have an actual physical gear selector lever, it seems like. And then you pull away. If there's one word to really describe the Supra, it's sharp. Everything is sharp, even here in normal mode. And you do have the ability to select sport mode and then configure your own individual sport modes. I've just got it set so that normal mode is the softest for everything and sport is the firmest. But you can hear we're in normal mode right now. The exhaust isn't too loud. And that was another big surprise for me. I expected this thing to just be burbling the whole time. Maybe that's because every Supra I've ever heard drive by has aftermarket exhaust, or is in sport mode, or has an engine tune, or what have you. But I sort of began to suspect that maybe Toyota didn't want the exhaust to be too loud so you could hear a little bit of turbo spool. You can hear that whine, you can hear it blow off every now and then, but you can see we're on a little bit of a rougher road and I'm bouncing around a little bit. It's a sports car, there's no doubt about it. Even in normal mode, the dampers are pretty firm, the chassis is pretty flat, and the steering is pretty tight. In fact, the steering is almost too tight. It feels like the car turns faster than the steering wheel turns. But that sort of brings up this little detail. Part of that might be because I heard from a little birdie on the street that this precise car came fresh from Car and Driver's month-long testing, and the tires are torched. I think the alignment might be a little off. Either way, it feels a little funky. Now obviously tires are the most important part of any car, so if these are torched, it's kind of not fair for me to be judging the Supra super hard. There are Michelin Pilot Super Sports, which I didn't even know Michelin still made, 275 at the back, 255 up front, and that's pretty good and wide. This car weighs 3,400 pounds, but it's one of those miracles of engineering where it actually doesn't feel that heavy. And because the steering is so sharp, and the suspension keeps it so flat, it manages to just really cut through these corners like a scalpel. And then you put it in sport mode and it noticeably firms up further. The steering gets even tighter, the throttle response gets even better, and the exhaust note gets a little louder. Let me tell you, this thing is fast. Theoretically, it's rated at 382 horsepower and 368 pound-feet of torque, but dyno testing has shown cars putting out more than that at the wheels, including driveline losses. So there's a good chance Toyota and BMW seriously underrated this from the factory, which kind of brings up that old Japanese gentleman's agreement. And so maybe that is one of the things that's a pro that comes from the Toyota side. It's got that old 8-speed ZF automatic, not a dual clutch like you might expect from something so focused on performance, but it is the best automatic transmission on the planet, and the shifts are super quick. They're not quite snappy, but they're pretty good, and it's so smooth in town. Because this car has so much torque, even down low at like 2,000 RPM, you're just raring to go. You can hear that shift. That's pretty fast. But in town, you're not lurching with all kinds of torque because you do have such a smooth shifting 8-speed. And the engine just delivers power so well. That's got to be the BMW side of things. We've lost the iconic 2JZ GTE that it was in the Mark IV Supra, but oh man, this is a pretty solid replacement. Now, it's not quite as awesome as BMW's S58, which is basically this engine with all kinds of internal upgrades, allows them to push 24 PSI of boost from the factory, do 510 horsepower, and people are just doing injectors and maybe a little engine tune and turbo kit, and they're doing like 800 horsepower, and they're saying that engine's reliable. But the B58 does pretty good. I wish it did have a slightly higher red line. It's like orange to 6,500 and then red above 7,000. And yet, it's got so much power down low that it's almost like it has a pretty high red line. And you can just hear it. It's smooth. You've got such linear power delivery. You can tell there's a turbo, but it's not quite that boosty turbo like people who love the older Supras really enjoy when they just put the huge turbos on there and have super long turbo lag. This is the opposite. You can feel the build, but it has like no turbo lag. Super impressive. Again, probably a plus from the BMW side of development. On the other hand, using the automatic via the paddle shifters, you've got some of the cost-cutting features that make the Supra such an affordable sports car, at least the base models. This one is a 3.0 premium, and so it costs like $57,000 if you can find one. We can't get into dealer shortages right now because I just don't know what's going on all over the country. I know you can't get these in LA. But now we're at $57,000 as opposed to the base 2.0 Supra, which starts at more like 40. And when you're at a car that's almost 60 grand or more, if you're paying big markups, you want probably metal paddle shifters. You wish you had a little more real leather, but then again, you're paying for that BMW engine and drivetrain. So it's just a trade-off with this car. Trade-offs might be sort of the name of the game. At the very least, everyone worried about how BMW reliability would play into the Supra's longevity knows that Toyota did force BMW to make the B58 engine more reliable. They put it through their torture testing and basically sent it back to Germany saying, hey, we want additional valve retainer clips and blah, blah, blah to make it up to their standards of reliability. So that's a big pro from the Toyota side of things. Now, my first car was an E46 325i, and you can definitely feel the BMW heritage in this car. The chassis tuning, the suspension, and the silky smooth inline-six, it's all there, but it is a little different. The brakes do bring the car to a stop relatively well, but they just don't inspire the confidence that I expect given the rest of the performance of the engine and the steering and the suspension. Then again, you can see me sort of bouncing around here. The traction control is a little generous. You can get this thing a little bit iffy, not too hard. But then again, that might also be that the Michelin tires are just torched. They're really looking ragged, and I think that they'll probably need replacement after I spend a couple hours in the canyons, further breaking them down. But I'm going through here really fast. It probably doesn't show up on camera, but it just corners really well. We're not talking about a mid-engine sports car here, but we sort of are, because we know BMW always puts the engines nice and low and far back in the chassis to make it feel like it's just perfectly balanced. And in that regard, it reminds me of an E36 M3 that I've driven a lot. It's a similar size. This thing's tiny. It fits in my garage no problem. Unlike some of the other Lexus products that I've had lately, which are just big and heavy and barely go in my garage with the door closed. This thing's tiny, and that's something I love about it. The trunk, surprisingly useful. I don't think I could put a road bike in here, but it's big enough. I was a little bit impressed by that, so good work all around on the engineering for spaciousness. Then again, the long hood does make you feel like you're in something of a larger car because you're a little bit further back than expected, especially with this dash design where it sort of goes up and then back down with the bulbous hood. Talking about design of the Supra, I'm a little bit torn there too. Some of it's really nice. You got these angular rakish air intakes. It's a modern take on the original 4th generation, which was obviously an iconic design, slightly less aggressive. Maybe not in bright red, but I think I'd be okay with one of these in like the sort of mattish silver that they do. It's a color that really sort of covers up some of the more angular parts that are too aggressive and really smooths out the overall profile, which is great. Very hard to capture on camera, I just discovered, but I kind of dig it. The interior continues that design somewhat, but we've also just got this nice square dash with AC outlets. There's this weird part where there's a knee pad here, but not here, so it's not symmetrical. And yet the place where I'm supposed to put my phone with a charging pad is under here, and I can't really reach it without like going around the shifter. So you gotta go from this side. That's a little questionable. The touchscreen is actually pretty nice. It works snappy. It uses Apple CarPlay, as you can see, and then you can mess with all of Toyota and BMW's settings through there, and it's a pretty intuitive system, if not the absolute greatest I've ever used. The funny part, of course, is that this car, this Supra, which debuted in 2018, I believe, has a touchscreen. I just gave back a pair of Lexus $100,000 coupes, neither of which had a touchscreen. That's the LC500 and the RCF. They do have CarPlay, but you can't use it with your finger, so it's kind of pointless because you've got that trackpad system. And that brings us to the competition. In a certain way, Toyota is competing with the Lexus RCF with this Supra, and it only costs a little bit more than half as much. And I would rather have this car than the RCF Fuji Speedway that I drove. That thing cost $103,000. Now sure, it's got all the carbon fiber and a naturally aspirated V8, but I think this car is faster in the corners and probably in a straight line too. Plus, I dig the styling more, and you just can't beat half price. Now of course, we all know that as much as Toyota and BMW can act like they were listening to the fans of the Supra when they installed a new manual and added it to the lineup, we all know that the real reason is because Nissan is coming out with a new Z with a 6-speed manual, and it's going to be a tight competitor with the Supra. So far, I've sat in the Z, I fired it up, but I haven't driven it. It's going to be a little bit of a heavier car, for sure. It's a little bigger. I kind of dig the interior. You can see I'm really bouncing here on a rougher section of road. The question is, how will it drive? Is it going to be softer? Is it going to be faster? It doesn't sound like it's going to sound as good as this car, and really, it's going to be an interesting one to watch to see if Nissan can get in on this market with the new Z. I think they will be able to. It looks pretty good. It's got that same heritage. The downsides are it's got a V6, not an inline-six, and it's maybe a little bit cheap on the inside. And some of the little design details, like the door handle, just really don't mesh with the retro futuristic exterior. It's going to be interesting. I'm excited to get behind the wheel of that one and test it out on these roads and see how it compares to the Supra. Now I would say I'm optimistic that Nissan will be able to capture some of that magic with the Z, and they've definitely tailored it for the enthusiast. It's got all kinds of cool gauges like a boost gauge and even a turbo rev tachometer, which seems a little silly, but hey, it's kind of nifty. I've never seen one of those before. And that brings up the single biggest flaw about the Toyota Supra. We got a twin scroll turbocharged inline-six from BMW. That's a great engine. No boost gauge. Maybe I just can't find it, but I tried playing around with the sports screen that shows the horsepower and torque output. Couldn't find it. Still, it's a fun car, it's an exciting car. I'm glad they brought the Supra back. I'm glad that they're doing it as a manual, and that's what I'm really looking forward to. The 6-speed should have different gear ratios, hopefully be a ton of fun. Hopefully they can combine more of that Toyota and BMW engineering prowess and make sort of a great car that's the best of both worlds. I hope you learned something watching this today. Thank you for watching, and as always, before you log off, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out.